The Kreth-Salan war fleet dropped into Earth orbit at 300 hours Greenwich Mean Time, and Supreme Invasion Commander Veth Nara watched his forward display with the particular expression of a man who has done something so many times that doing it again requires conscious effort to remain present for. 31 worlds. He had stood on this bridge or bridges like it 31 times and watched 31 civilizations register the arrival of his fleet on their primitive sensor systems, and watched 31 civilizations make the same calculation and reach the same conclusion and begin the same desperate scramble toward the same inevitable end. The details varied. The outcome never did. Earth was rotating slowly below him, blue and white and brown, unremarkable in the way that most inhabited worlds were unremarkable from orbit. A thin skin of atmosphere over rock and water, lit on one side and dark on the other. Covered in the infrared signatures of industrial activity and population, centers that his tactical display translated into target packages, with the efficient indifference of a system that had processed 31 previous target packages and found nothing surprising in any of them. Fleet disposition confirmed, his tactical officer reported. All 640 assault craft in holding pattern, ground force commanders standing by, orbital suppression batteries charged and ready. Veth Nara nodded without turning from the display. 640 assault craft, 80,000 ground troops, orbital suppression capability sufficient to crack a continental shelf if required, though it had never been required because the ground troops were always sufficient, and the orbital suppression was theater more than weapon. The visible proof of what refusal cost, deployed not to destroy but to persuade. 31 worlds, 640 craft, 80,000 troops. This was, Veth Nara thought, going to take 4 days. He was being generous with the estimate. Begin the invasion broadcast, he said. Standard package, then launch the first wave. His intelligence officer, Draxon, appeared at his shoulder with the particular quality of someone who wants to say something and is deciding whether to say it. Veth Nara had worked with Draxon for 11 years and recognized the quality immediately. Something on your mind, San? The human military response time, Draxon said carefully. In our simulations, we projected 18 to 22 minutes between first detection and coordinated military response. Our forward observers are showing coordinated military movement beginning at, he checked his display, 4 minutes after our arrival signature would have been detectable on their long-range systems. Veth Nara looked at him, 4 minutes. Yes, sir, which suggests either their detection capability is more advanced than our assessment, or they were already at battle stations when we arrived, Veth Nara said. Yes, sir. A pause. Veth Nara looked back at the display, at the blue-white planet, at the infrared signatures of military installations already active, already moving, already responding with the organized speed of a machine that had been running in standby and had just received the signal it was waiting for. Note it, he said. Launch the first wave. The first wave hit Earth's surface at 3:47 hours Greenwich Mean Time, and it hit simultaneously across 11 target zones, the major population and industrial centers that Veth Nara's target package identified as the critical nodes of human civilization. Boston, Chicago, London, Berlin, Tokyo, Sydney, Sao Paulo, 6 others. 640 assault craft screaming through atmosphere at angles and velocities that human aerospace defense systems were not designed to track, deploying 80,000 of the finest ground troops the Kreth-Salan sovereignty had ever fielded, and the plan was simple and clean and had worked 31 times. Overwhelm the critical nodes simultaneously, demonstrate the futility of resistance, accept surrender. It went wrong in the first 11 minutes. Not catastrophically, not in a way that Veth Nara could point to and say, here, this is where the plan failed. It went wrong in the quiet, accumulating way of a calculation that is correct in all its individual components and wrong in its fundamental assumption. The human military was already there, not positioned defensively, not arrayed in the formation of a force that had received warning and scrambled to its positions. Positioned offensively, in formations that San's tactical analysis software spent 6 minutes attempting to categorize before returning the assessment. Unknown formation type, no match in database, recommend manual analysis. The humans had not arrayed themselves to stop the landing. They had arrayed themselves around the landing zones, outside them, with fields of fire directed inward. They had let the assault craft land. They had let 80,000 Krethsalon ground troops deploy from their craft and begin their advance into the urban terrain of 11 cities. And then they had closed the ring. San brought the first field reports to Veth Nara at 4:12 hours, 25 minutes after the first wave landed, and his expression carried the early stages of something that Veth Nara had not seen on his intelligence officer's face in 11 years of working together. Ground force commanders are reporting unexpected resistance in all 11 target zones, San said. Assault Group 7 in Boston is reporting flanking fire from 3 directions simultaneously. Assault Group 3 in Chicago reports human forces advancing toward them rather than retreating. Assault Group 12 in London. He stopped. Report San. Assault Group 12 has stopped transmitting, San said. Veth Nara turned from the display for the first time since the invasion began. Stopped transmitting. Yes, sir. Last transmission at 4:08. Content was San checked his screen. Contact heavy unknown weapon signature taking casualties request, and then the transmission ended. The bridge of the Sovereignty flagship was quiet enough that the hum of its environmental systems was audible. Unknown weapon signature, Veth Nara said. Yes, sir. We are analyzing what we received before the transmission cut. It appears to be a directed electromagnetic pulse of a specific frequency pattern. Our analysts have not seen this configuration previously. San paused. It is, however, extremely effective against our ground troops' armor communication systems. Veth Nara looked at the tactical display. 11 target zones. In 8 of them, the advance indicators that should have been moving steadily inward toward the city centers were stationary or moving in unexpected directions. In 2 of them, the indicators were moving backward. In 31 invasions, Veth Nara's ground forces had never moved backward. Deploy the second wave, he said. Double the ground force in Boston and Chicago, and get me a direct line to Ground Force Commander Setar. 340 kilometers below, in a reinforced command bunker beneath what had once been a regional National Guard installation outside of Hartford, Connecticut, General Raymond Haskell was drinking bad coffee and watching 6 screens simultaneously, and had not slept in 31 hours. He was 64 years old. His right knee had been reconstructed twice and ached in the cold with the reliable persistence of an old enemy. His hair had gone fully white sometime in his late 50s, and he had not particularly cared. He was 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighed 190 pounds, and had the build of a man who had never stopped doing the physical work even after the rank made it optional, because the rank had never made it feel optional to him. He had retired 9 years ago. He had spent 9 years in a house in rural Virginia with a vegetable garden and a dog named Corporal and a standing weekly call with his daughter in Seattle, and he had been entirely content. And when the phone rang at 200 hours 3 days ago with a voice he recognized telling him what the long-range sensors had detected inbound, he had listened to the entire briefing without interrupting, and then he had said, "I'll be there in 4 hours," and hung up and gone to find his uniform. He had not been surprised. This was the thing about Raymond Haskell that the people who knew him professionally understood, and the people who knew him personally sometimes found unsettling. He had been waiting for this for a long time, not with dread, not with anticipation, but with the quiet, patient certainty of a man who has read enough history to understand that certain things are not questions of if, only when. He had been part of the planning group 12 years ago. the classified project whose official designation he would not think in an unsecured location, even in his own head, and whose unofficial name among the people who worked on it was simply the contingency. 12 years of war gaming. 12 years of asking the same question. If something comes, and it comes with overwhelming force, and it comes to the most defended planet in human history and finds our defenses inadequate, what do we do? The answer they had arrived at over 12 years of refinement was not what most people would have expected. It was not a bigger gun. It was not a better shield. It was a trap. Sergeant Reyes, Haskell said, without looking away from the screens. Sergeant Dominic Reyes materialized at his shoulder. 34 years old, dark eyes, a jaw that looked like it had been constructed with the specific intention of expressing determination. He had a photograph of his daughter, 7 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding a crayon drawing of what was apparently a horse, folded in the left breast pocket of his combat vest. He had put it there when he got dressed this morning and had not thought about it since, because thinking about it now was not useful, and Reyes was a man who was ruthless about usefulness. Sir, second wave is deploying. I'm showing 300 additional craft inbound to Boston and Chicago. Haskell looked at the screen, looked at the formation data, looked at the timing. They're doubling down. That's what we wanted, sir. That's what we wanted, Haskell agreed. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, set it down. They've deployed 160,000 troops to urban terrain that we've spent 8 years preparing. Every building in the target zones has been modified. Every sewer line, every underground transit corridor, every basement. They're standing in the middle of the largest prepared killing ground in human history, and they think they're invading. Reyes said nothing. This was one of the things Haskell valued about him. The man understood that some statements did not require a response. Get Lieutenant Odom, Haskell said. Tell her I want the EMP package ready for full deployment in 20 minutes. Yes, sir. Reyes paused, half-turned. Sir, the Boston units are taking significant casualties. Martinez's company. I know, Haskell said. Sir, if we deploy now, instead of waiting for the second wave to fully commit. I know what we lose if we move early, Reyes. Haskell looked at him. I also know what we lose if we move late. 20 minutes. Get Odom. Reyes left. Haskell turned back to his screens, watched the indicators, watched the second wave craft screaming down through the atmosphere toward Boston and Chicago. He thought about the men and women in those streets, taking fire, holding position, buying 20 minutes with something that could not be replaced and could not be refunded. He knew all their names. He had made it a point to know all their names. He picked up his coffee again. It was cold. He drank it anyway. Lieutenant Kara Odom was 28 years old and had been awake for 36 hours, and had the focused, slightly translucent quality of someone operating on willpower and adrenaline, and the specific form of mental clarity that extreme fatigue sometimes produces, the kind where everything non-essential has been stripped away, and what remains is very sharp. She was at her station in the communications section of the bunker, surrounded by 3 screens and 2 analysts, and the accumulated data of 45 minutes of alien communications intercepts, and she had found something. She had found it 30 minutes ago and spent 20 of those minutes checking it, rechecking it, running the analysis 3 different ways, and arriving at the same conclusion each time before she allowed herself to believe it. The alien command communication ran on a quantum entanglement frequency, standard for species at this technological level, theoretically unjammable, theoretically impervious to any electromagnetic interference that human technology could produce. Theoretically. The word that did a lot of work in communications engineering. The word that meant, under ideal conditions, with ideal equipment, assuming the laws of physics cooperate in the way we expect them to. The Kreth-Salon quantum communication system had a flaw, a subtle one, built into the hardware at the molecular level, a consequence of the specific crystal lattice structure they used for their entanglement matrices. At a specific EMP frequency, a frequency that did not exist in any natural phenomenon and that would therefore never have appeared in their testing environments. The lattice resonated. Not destructively, not enough to destroy the equipment, enough to introduce a phase delay of approximately 0.3 seconds into every transmitted signal. 0.3 seconds. On a battlefield where commands were issued and responses required in real time, 0.3 seconds of phase delay meant every order arrived a third of a second after it was given. Every unit response was a third of a second behind. In a coordinated military operation involving hundreds of units across 11 target zones, 0.3 seconds of systemic delay did not reduce effectiveness by 0.3 seconds. It reduced effectiveness by approximately 60%. Odom had run the combat modeling 4 times. 60% reduction in command effectiveness, applied simultaneously across all alien ground forces in all 11 target zones. At the moment Haskell's trap fully sprang, she found Reyes in the corridor. "I need the general," she said. Reyes looked at her face and started moving without asking why. Haskell listened to her for 90 seconds, asked 2 questions, received 2 answers, looked at her for 3 seconds with the particular expression of a man who is running a very fast internal calculation and arriving at a number he likes. "Do it," he said. "Sir, the power draw will." "I know what the power draw will do. Do it." Odom went back to her station at a pace that was almost but not quite running. Haskell turned to his screens, watched the second wave completing its deployment, watched 160,000 additional Kreth-Salon ground troops filing into the streets of Boston and Chicago, moving deeper into the urban terrain, moving toward the prepared positions, moving into the prepared ground. All of them now inside the ring. "Reyes," he said. "Sir." "Tell every unit 2 minutes." On the Sovereignty flagship, Drax-San was delivering his 4th field report in 40 minutes, and the quality of his voice had changed in a way that Veth Nara was tracking carefully. A tightening, a precision that came not from confidence but from the specific discipline of a professional trying to keep his voice level while reporting things that were not level. Ground Force Commander Setar reports the second wave has fully deployed in Boston and Chicago, Drax-San said. Advance is continuing, but pace is slower than projected. Human resistance in both cities is more organized than initial reports suggested. Setar's assessment is that the humans have prepositioned forces throughout the urban terrain in a pattern that suggests. He stopped. "Finish it, San." "A pattern that suggests pre-planning," Drax-San said. "Extensive pre-planning. The positioning of human forces is not consistent with a reactive defense. It is consistent with prepared engagement zones, as if they knew where our forces would advance." Veth Nara looked at his tactical display, at 160,000 troops in 2 cities, at the advance indicators moving slower than they should, at 11 target zones where the clean, fast conquest that should have been complete in 4 hours was instead generating a volume of field reports that was unprecedented in his 31 previous operations. "They knew where our forces would advance," he said slowly, "because they studied our previous operations." "Yes, sir, that is my assessment." "They studied 31 previous invasions, identified our standard urban advance pattern, and prepositioned their forces accordingly." He paused. "How long would that take to prepare?" Drax-San was quiet for a moment. "Sir, if you are asking how long a species would need to prepare the kind of coordinated, multi-city prepositioned defensive network, we appear to be encountering another pause years, possibly a decade or more." Veth Nara looked at the display. "They were waiting for us," he said, "not a question." "Sir." Every screen on the bridge flickered simultaneously. Not a power failure, the system stayed online. A flicker, like a shutter, lasting perhaps a quarter of a second, and then the communications board erupted. Every field report coming in simultaneously, not sequential, simultaneous. a wall of incoming transmissions that his communications officer was visibly struggling to process. Veth Nara caught fragments. Boston 2nd Wave reporting communications degradation. Chicago Ground Command reporting loss of unit coordination. London, the units that had gone quiet and then resumed partial communication, going silent again. Tokyo reporting unknown weapons fire from below, from underground, from the sewers. From the sewers. What is happening? Veth Nara said, and his voice was level, and he was proud of that because what he was feeling was not level. Sir, we are detecting a directed electromagnetic pulse, broad spectrum, covering all 11 target zones simultaneously, specific frequency pattern. His tactical officer's voice was moving faster than usual. It is affecting our quantum communication matrices. Command signal delay is a pause, sir. Command signal delay across all ground forces is showing 0.3 seconds systemic. All units, all zones. Veth Nara understood in an instant what that meant. He had commanded ground forces for 200 years. He did not need an analyst to calculate the effectiveness reduction. He could feel it in the suddenly fragmented, suddenly uncoordinated flow of reports coming in from 11 cities where a moment ago there had been a controlled operation, and now there was noise. Individual units, cut off from real-time command coordination, making individual decisions, advancing or holding or retreating based on what they could see in their immediate environment, rather than what the overall tactical picture required. 160,000 troops in prepared killing grounds, suddenly blind. Reinstate command coherence, he said. Sir, we are attempting, the EMP frequency is, our countermeasures are not. His communications officer stopped. Started again. Sir, our countermeasure library does not contain a response to this specific frequency pattern. It does not appear in our previous operational database. Because they built it for us, Veth Nara said quietly. They built it specifically for our communication system. In the streets of Boston, Sergeant Dominic Reyes heard Haskell's voice in his earpiece say 2 words. And those 2 words, after 47 minutes of holding position under fire while his shoulder bled through the field dressing, and 3 of his people lay dead in the rubble around him, were the most welcome 2 words he had heard in his life. All units. Reyes was already moving before the second word came. He came out of the ruined building at a dead run, his 12 remaining soldiers coming with him, and the street in front of him was full of Kreth-Salon ground troops who had, 30 seconds ago, been advancing with coordinated precision and were now hesitating, looking at each other. The 0.3 second delay in their command communications was invisible and devastating. The difference between a coordinated military unit and a collection of individuals waiting for orders that arrived just slightly too late to act on. That hesitation lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough. Reyes hit the first contact at full speed and did not stop. His unit crashed into the alien flank like something that had been compressed for 47 minutes and released all at once, and the ferocity of it was not tactical calculation. It was 47 minutes of watching his people die, and 3 friends in the rubble, and a photograph in his breast pocket, and the specific quality of fury that belongs to people who have been backed against a wall long enough. The Kreth-Salon were larger than humans, stronger by raw physical measurement. Their armor was better than anything humans could field at individual scale, their weapons more powerful, their training rigorous and extensive. None of that mattered in the next 4 seconds, because Reyes' unit did not fight like a unit that was calculating odds. They fought like they were already dead and had decided to make it count. All across Boston, all across Chicago, all across 9 other burning cities, the same thing was happening. Human units that had been holding position, absorbing punishment, buying minutes, uncoiling. Every unit simultaneously. The EMP disruption dropping alien command coherence at the exact moment the trap fully closed, and the humans who came out of the prepared positions and the underground corridors and the prepositioned buildings were not the demoralized remnants of a defense that had taken heavy casualties. They were the people who had been waiting for this moment for 47 minutes. And they were very, very angry. On the Sovereignty flagship, Veth Nara watched his invasion collapse. Not quickly, not cleanly. It collapsed the way things collapse when they were built on a foundation that has given way slowly at first, then all at once. The weight of 160,000 troops in 11 cities pressing down on a tactical situation that had inverted itself with the silent speed of a well-designed trap snapping shut. The reports came in fragments, the 0.3-second communication delay making coordination impossible, his ground commanders fighting individual battles without the ability to share tactical data in real time, unit cohesion degrading, flanks exposed. The humans who had been defending, who had been absorbing losses, who had been yielding ground suddenly everywhere, coming from below, coming from the sides, coming from directions that his commanders had assessed as cleared and found were not cleared, had never been cleared, had been occupied by humans who had waited patiently in the dark for exactly this moment. Draxon stood beside him and did not speak for a long time. When he spoke, his voice had the quality of a man reporting something he had not fully believed was possible until he was looking directly at the evidence. Sir, casualty projections for ground forces across all 11 target zones. At current attrition rate, he stopped. Report San. At current attrition rate, we will have lost 30% of ground force strength within 2 hours, 60% within 4. Another pause. Sir, I need to tell you something. I have been running an analysis on the human prepositioning data, the extent of the preparation, the number of modified structures, the underground corridor network, the pre-placed weapons caches, the communications infrastructure. He stopped again, and this time the pause was longer, and when he continued, there was something in his voice that was not the intelligence officer's careful neutrality. It was the sound of a man who has arrived at a conclusion that has changed something fundamental in his understanding. Sir, this preparation did not begin when we arrived. It did not begin when we entered the system. The depth of this preparation, the structural modifications alone, represent years of work, a decade at minimum. Veth Nara looked at the display. They knew we were coming, Draxon said. Not us specifically, not the Kreth Salon specifically. They knew that something would come. They looked at the universe and they decided that something would eventually come, and they spent a decade making sure that when it did, it would walk into this. He gestured at the screens. At 11 cities where an invasion force of 160,000 was bleeding into prepared ground. They built this for whoever came, and we walked into it. Veth Nara said nothing. There is more, sir. Draxon's voice was very quiet now. Our long-range sensors are detecting power signatures from Earth's orbital approaches. Multiple signatures. The humans have space assets that our pre-mission intelligence did not account for. They are not yet moving, but they are active. They are powered up. And their configuration suggests, he checked the screen, sir, their configuration is offensive. 200 years. 31 worlds. Veth Nara had stood on this bridge and watched civilizations collapse in real time. He had watched beings who had faced him with defiance crumble into surrender. He had seen every variation of resistance that the inhabited galaxy had to offer, and he had overcome every one of them, and his assessment going into every operation was built on 200 years of pattern recognition that had never failed him. He had not accounted for a species that looked at the universe and decided something would come, and spent a decade building a trap for it, and then waited. He had not accounted for the particular quality of preparation that came from a species that had been fighting itself, continuously and catastrophically, for its entire recorded history, and had learned things in the doing of that which could not be learned any other way. He had not accounted for people who built killing grounds in their own cities, who let their own streets burn, who absorbed casualties that would have broken 31 other civilizations and kept coming. He had not accounted for Raymond Haskell. He was accounting for him now. Begin withdrawal preparation, Veth Nara said. The bridge was silent for exactly 2 seconds. Sir, his tactical officer began. Begin withdrawal preparation, Vethnara said again, with the absolute flatness of a man who has made a decision and has no interest in revisiting it. All ground forces to rally points. Assault craft to extract on my order. Plot an FTL course out of this system. Sir, withdrawal under fire will cost us. I know what it will cost us, Vethnara said. Begin. The withdrawal took 4 hours. It cost more than Vethnara had projected, because the humans did not stop fighting when the withdrawal began, and because the prepared ground that had been so effective at trapping his advancing forces was equally effective at making extraction difficult, and because the humans had clearly wargamed the withdrawal scenario as well as the advance scenario and had prepared accordingly. He lost 41% of his ground force before the last assault craft cleared the atmosphere. He had never, in 31 previous operations, lost more than 3%. Raymond Haskell was not in the bunker when the last alien craft left Earth's atmosphere. He had left the bunker 4 hours ago, over Ray's objection, and walked out into the ruins of Hartford in the gray pre-dawn light with his bad knee and his cold coffee and nothing else, because he needed to see it with his own eyes. He needed to see the sky. He stood in a ruined parking lot and looked up and watched the alien craft climb through the smoke and the clouds, and he watched the last one clear the atmosphere, and he watched the alien fleet on the eastern horizon of the sky begin to move, begin to pull back, begin the sequence that his orbital assets were confirming was an FTL preparation. Ray's found him there 20 minutes later, because Ray's always found him. They stood together in the parking lot and watched the sky. Boston, Haskell said. Holding, Martinez's company, what's left of it has the northern sector. The underground units are clearing the last pockets. A pause. It's going to take time, sir, but it's ours. Haskell nodded. Sir, Ray said after a moment, you knew they'd walk into it. I knew that anything that came here expecting easy would walk into it, Haskell said. I didn't know it would be them specifically. Didn't know when. 12 years ago when we started planning this, I didn't know anything except that something would come eventually, and that when it did, the worst thing we could do was the obvious thing. He looked at the sky. The obvious thing was build a wall, stand behind it, hope it holds. And the non-obvious thing. Let them in, Haskell said simply. Make them think they're winning, and then close the door. In orbit on the Sovereignty flagship, the FTL drives were spooling up. Vethnara stood at his display and looked at the planet one last time, at the cities burning, at the asset signatures of human orbital systems that had powered up and were now sitting in silent readiness, not pursuing, not threatening, just watching. Present, capable. Just watching was enough. Draxon appeared at his shoulder. He was holding a tablet. His expression was the expression of a man delivering the final piece of information in a report that had been full of unwelcome pieces, and this one was the last and largest. Sir, we intercepted human communications during the engagement. Routine encrypted military traffic. We broke the encryption 2 hours ago. Some of it is operational, but some of it is, he stopped. Sir, some of it is dated, archives, accessed during the engagement, probably for operational reference. What kind of archives? Planning documents, sir. The trap we walked into, the prepared ground, the EMP system, the underground networks. Draxon's voice was entirely level and entirely bleak. The oldest planning document in the archive is dated 14 years ago. The project was formally initiated with full resource commitment 11 years ago. He set the tablet down. Sir, they were building this before we ever looked at this system, before we selected this world as a target. Before we knew this species existed. He paused. They didn't build this for us. They built it for whoever came, for anyone who looked at this planet and thought it was easy. Vethnara looked at the tablet, at the dates, at the scope of what a species had built in its own cities, in its own streets, in the bones of its own civilization, because it had looked at the universe and decided something would come, and decided that when it did, the answer was not defense. The answer was a trap that had been waiting in the dark for 14 years. The FTL drives reached full power. Veth Nara said one thing to no one in particular, to the planet that was still turning slowly below him, blue and white and burning in 11 places and completely, utterly undefeated. "We were never invading," he said quietly. "We were being hunted." The flagship jumped. The fleet followed, one by one, vanishing from Earth's sky like lights going out. In the parking lot outside Hartford, Raymond Haskell watched the last FTL signature fade on the small tactical screen Reyes was holding, and then he looked up at the sky, which was beginning to lighten in the east with the first gray suggestion of dawn coming over a horizon that was still smeared with smoke from a dozen burning cities. Beside him, Reyes said nothing, understood that nothing was the right thing. Haskell's knee ached. He had not slept in 34 hours. His cities were burning and his people were dead in the streets, and the work of rebuilding had not yet begun and would not be small or fast or easy. He looked at the sky anyway, at the dawn coming up over the smoke. He thought about the 14 years, the planning groups and the war games and the endless, grinding, unglamorous work of preparing for something that might never come and had to be prepared for as though it definitely would. He thought about the people who had done that work and would never see a headline for it, because the work of preparation never makes headlines. Only the work of the moment does. He thought about Reyes's people in the rubble, about Martinez's company. He thought about all of it, and he held it, because it needed to be held by someone, and that was part of the job too. Then he straightened his back, bad knee in 34 hours and all of it. "Reyes," he said. "Sir." "Get me a fresh coffee, and get me the rebuild assessment team on the line." He turned from the sky. "We've got work to do." Somewhere in the galaxy, on a flagship running at FTL toward a debrief that Veth Nara was not looking forward to, Draxon sat in his station and looked at the intercepted human planning documents on his screen. At 14 years of preparation. At the quiet, patient, completely unannounced work of a species that had decided a very long time ago that the universe was not going to catch them unprepared. He thought about 31 worlds that had surrendered, about the calculation that every one of them had made, that resistance was futile, that the force arrayed against them was too great, that the only option was compliance. He thought about what made humanity different. Not their weapons, which were improvised and specific and clever. Not their tactics, which were effective but not unprecedented in the database. Not their individual soldiers, who were formidable but not superhuman. What made them different was that they had never, not for a single day in their entire history, accepted that the shape of things was fixed, that the powerful stayed powerful, that the strong dictated to the weak, that an overwhelming force meant an inevitable outcome. They had looked at the universe, with all its dangers and its silences and its long history of civilizations that had knelt, and they had said, "Not us." And then they had gotten to work. He closed the file. Outside the viewport, the stars streamed past at FTL velocity, and behind them, growing smaller with every passing second, the blue-white planet turned on in the dark. Still standing. Always still standing.